Hi everyone, my name is Vintee and I'm currently working as an intern under Lawminds. And today we are going to learn about a very important concept in criminal law, the first information report, commonly known as an FIR. Let's begin with a simple situation. Imagine you are standing outside a shop and you see a robbery take place. The thief runs away and you immediately go to the nearest police station. You narrate everything to the police officer. The officer then writes down what you tell them, and that record becomes the very first formal step of the criminal justice system. That written record is called the FIR. Now, before we move forward, just one small instructions that my slides will mostly contain only bullet points. So please listen carefully and feel free to take notes. Now, let me start by telling you what exactly is an FIR. It is the first official written record given to the police about a cognizable offense. A cognizable offense means a serious crime where police have the power to arrest without a warrant and begin investigation without court permission. The purpose of the FIR is very straightforward. It creates an official record that a crime has taken place and acts like a starting point for the entire criminal process. Without an FIR, the police generally cannot begin investigation, cannot collect evidence, and cannot proceed with the procedural steps. Now, earlier under the CrPC, FIR was covered under Section 154. But under the new law, that is the BNSS, FIR is now covered under Section 173. Since this section is central to understanding FIR, I will break it down into smaller parts so that it becomes clear to all of you. Section 173.1 explains how information can be given to the police. It allows two methods, oral or through electronic communication, such as email, online portals, or even registered helpline systems. When information is given orally, the police officer must write it down, read it back to the informant, and then take the informant's signature. In case of electronic communication, the informant must sign the information within 3 days, either physically or via a legally recognized mode of verification. The same subsection also provides additional safeguards for vulnerable complainants, especially women and persons with disabilities. For example, if the offense involves sexual crimes against a woman, the FIR must be recorded only by a women police officer or another women officer authorized for this purpose. Now let's connect Section 173 with a very important landmark case. Lalita Kumari versus Government of UP. In this case, the complaint involved a missing minor girl. Instead of registering an FIR immediately, the police kept delaying the process and insisted on conducting a preliminary inquiry first. For those of you who don't know what a preliminary inquiry is, it means a short limited inquiry conducted before registering an FIR just to verify whether the information appears genuine or falls into a specific exceptional category. Now, because of this delay, valuable time was lost in tracing the child. The Supreme Court observed and held if the information clearly discloses a cognizable offense, the police must register the FIR without delay. Additionally, police officers do not have the discretion to decide whether they want to register or not. However, the court also recognized that in certain types of cases such as medical negligence, matrimonial disputes, commercial disputes, corruption matters, etc., a short preliminary inquiry may be allowed to avoid misuse. The court further fixed the timeline that if such preliminary inquiry is required, it must be completed within 7 to 14 days. Moving ahead, Section 173.2 deals with the right of the informant to receive a free copy of the FIR once it is registered. It ensures the complainant has proof that the FIR exists, what exactly has been written, and whether details were altered or omitted, etc. Further, Section 173(3) is directly connected to the principle discussed in the Lalita Kumari case. This subsection says that if the offence is punishable with 3 years or more but less than 7 years, then the police may, without prior written permission from a senior officer such as the Deputy Superintendent of Police, conduct a preliminary inquiry before registering the FIR. The key points here are: it is not automatic as it requires permission, it applies only to certain types of offences, and it must be completed within a fixed timeline, that is 14 days. Now let me ask you a question. What if the police officer refuses to register an FIR? This is where Section 173(4) comes and gives the complainant a legal remedy. If the police station refuses to file the FIR, the person can send the information in writing to the Superintendent of Police, commonly called the SP. Once he receives the information, they have two options: either investigate the case themselves or direct another police officer to investigate on their behalf. But there is also an additional safeguard that Section 175(3) must be read with this provision. Section 175(3) says that if even after approaching the SP there is no action, then complainant may apply to the magistrate supported by an affidavit. The magistrate, after reviewing the application and conducting any inquiry they feel necessary, can then order the case to be investigated. So, the final remedy path becomes starting with the police station, then going to the SP, and then going to the magistrate. This was reaffirmed in the case of Sakiri Vasu versus State of UP. In this case, the petitioner approached the High Court directly because the police refused to register his FIR. The Supreme Court observed that if people start going directly to the High Court every time the police refuses to register an FIR, the High Courts will become flooded with such routine matters. The court explained that the criminal justice system already has a built-in remedy structure and people should follow that before approaching higher courts. So again, the clear pathway is: first, approach the police station and give the information. If the police refuses, go to the Superintendent of Police under Section 173(4). If even after that no action is taken, file an application before the magistrate under Section 175(3). The magistrate, after reviewing the complaint, has the power to direct the police to register the FIR and even monitor the investigation. Now let's talk about Section 174 of BNSS, which deals with non-cognizable offences. Non-cognizable offences are offences where the police cannot arrest without a warrant and cannot start an investigation without permission from a magistrate. These are usually less serious offences such as defamation, public nuisance, verbal threats, etc. Because these offences are not as serious, the law does not allow FIRs to be filed for them automatically. So under this section, the police can record the complaint in the daily diary, but they cannot investigate unless the magistrate gives an order. To understand this better, let's look at another important case called T.T. Anthony versus State of Kerala. In this case, 2 FIRs were filed for the same incident, and so the Supreme Court held that the first information received by the police about a cognizable offence is the actual FIR. Once that FIR is registered and investigation has begun, there cannot be a second FIR for the same incident or occurrence. The court explained that allowing multiple FIRs for the same event could lead to harassment, manipulation, misuse, etc. However, the court also clarified one important exception. If there are 2 different versions of the same incident, for example, a complaint and a counter-complaint by the other party, then a second FIR may be allowed because it represents a separate version of facts, not a repetition of facts. There is also the case of State of Haryana versus Bhajan Lal, where the court noticed that sometimes FIRs are filed not because a real crime happened, but due to rivalries or pressure tactics. The FIR in this case was alleged to be politically motivated, so the Supreme Court examined when courts should have the power to quash or cancel an FIR. The court also said that this step should be allowed only in rarest of rare cases because otherwise it may stop justice before it even begins. Thus, the court laid down 7 specific categories where quashing or cancelling of an FIR may be justified. Those are: first, when the allegations in the FIR, even if taken as true, do not disclose any offence. Second, when the allegations do not disclose a cognizable offence. Third, when the allegations are absurd or unbelievable. Fourth, when the case is purely civil in nature. Fifth, when the criminal proceeding is malicious or filed with ulterior motive. Sixth, when there is an express legal bar to filing the case. And seventh, when the FIR is filed with the intention to abuse the legal process. Let's quickly recap the entire topic in a simple way. Section 173 tells us how FIR must be recorded and ensures protection for vulnerable complainants. Section 175(3) also gives a remedy pathway when police refuses to register an FIR. Section 174 reminds us that FIR applies only to cognizable offences and not every dispute. And the 4 landmark cases guide us how these sections work in practice, such as Lalita Kumari tells us that the FIR must be registered if information shows a cognizable offence. Sakeri Vasu shows us a clear remedy path of what we should do when police refuses to register an FIR. T.T. Anthony says that only 1 FIR should be done per incident. And Bhajan Lal says that FIR can be quashed only in rare cases using the 7-point test. Alright, that brings us to the end of today's session. I hope this helped you understand FIRs more clearly, not just as a definition but as a practical process supported by provisions and case laws, and hopefully you will be able to remember the concept better and apply it confidently. If you found today's discussion helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Lawminds. Thank you once again for listening and see you in the next session.